My name is Rachel. I am 32 years old. And on my wedding day, the row of chairs with the little family sign on it was completely, painfully empty. No one from my side walked me down the aisle. No one from my side sat in those seats we had carefully reserved. A few hours earlier, my phone had lit up with the last text from my mom, a neat little sentence that felt like a slap. "We will celebrate later, honey. Your brother's Hawaii trip is already booked." It was not a joke. It was not a misunderstanding. She had actually picked a beach vacation over my wedding. My brother had texted me the week before, laughing about it like it was nothing. "Vacation cannot wait. The flights are non-refundable, you get it." I stood there in my dress, listening to the music start, pretending I did not see those empty chairs, pretending it did not matter that my own family had decided sand and cocktails were more important than seeing me say my vows. People later told me they were sure my family had their reasons, as if there was any good reason for a mother to skip her daughter's wedding for a discounted flight. The funny part is, they all assumed I would just swallow it, forgive, and move on because that is what I had always done. They thought I would smile through the hurt and wait for whatever later celebration my mom kept promising. But months after that day, when the roles were reversed and they were suddenly the ones begging me to show up for a big family wedding of their own, I finally stopped playing the understanding daughter. I just smiled and said, "Not this time." If you think choosing a vacation over your child's wedding is the worst part of this story, wait until you hear how far my family went to defend that choice, and what I finally did to make them taste their own lesson. Before all of that, before the empty chairs and the fake promises to celebrate later, it actually started pretty simply. My name is Rachel. I live in Seattle and work as a marketing manager for a tech company based in New York, mostly remote, juggling video calls, campaign decks, and endless Slack pings. I met my now husband Alex on a dating app 4 years ago. We went for coffee at a little neighborhood place on a drizzly Saturday, both ready to bail after 30 minutes if it was awkward. Instead, we ended up talking until the barista flipped the chairs onto the tables and told us they were closing. From that day on, that cafe felt like the unofficial starting point of my real adult life. When Alex proposed, he did it in that same spot, sliding a ring across the table between our half-finished lattes on a rainy fall afternoon. It felt obvious that our wedding date should be the anniversary of that first meeting, a fall weekend far enough out that everyone in our lives could plan around it. We booked a small vineyard about 40 minutes outside Seattle, sent in the deposit that made my stomach flutter, and started sending save the dates to coworkers and friends whose calendars fill up months in advance with kids' activities, product launches, and limited vacation days. At the beginning, my mom, Karen, acted thrilled. She cried on FaceTime when I held up my hand to show her the ring, said she was proud of me, and immediately launched into questions about colors, flowers, and what kind of dress I imagined. She repeated more than once, "I would not miss my only daughter's wedding for anything." My younger brother, Jake, who lives in New York and works in sales, dropped a quick congrats in the family group chat, along with a couple of jokes about the open bar and how he was going to destroy the dance floor. My dad, Tom, who is retired now, said he had always wanted to see Seattle, and maybe we could turn the trip into a little vacation with some sightseeing before or after the wedding. For a little while, it felt like everyone was pulling in the same direction. Then, a few weeks after we put the deposit down and started paying vendors, my mom called me sounding oddly hesitant, the way she does when she is about to make her problem my responsibility. She said she had just realized my chosen date overlapped with Jake's annual trip to Hawaii, the one he always talked about as his reset, his reward for hitting his quarterly numbers. She launched into a speech about how hard he works, late nights, targets, the stress of sales, how this trip is the one thing that keeps him going. At first, I thought she was just venting, so I said something like, "That is tough timing, but we booked the venue months in advance." She paused, then asked, very carefully, if Alex and I could move the wedding. Not by a day, not by shifting the time, but to an entirely different weekend so Jake would not have to change his flights or pay any fees. She moved straight into her greatest hits list of sacrifices from my childhood. Stories I have heard 100 times about the vacations she skipped and the things she gave up to raise us. How she always put her children first, and how she expected us to do the same for each other. The message underneath was clear. A good daughter is flexible when the family needs her to be. I reminded her that changing the date would mean losing money on the vineyard, renegotiating contracts with vendors, and probably forcing half our guests to rebook travel they had already arranged. She immediately accused me of being rigid and dramatic, said a wedding was just one day, and that mental health and rest for my brother were long-term things. A few minutes after we got off the phone, Jake texted me directly. He launched into a whole explanation about how he had found an unbelievable deal on flights and hotel through an app, how everything was already prepaid, and how outrageous the change fees would be. He ended by saying he really needed this break for his sanity, and that he knew I would understand because I have always been the understanding one. When I did not immediately cave, my mom started bringing it up constantly in calls and messages, sometimes gently, sometimes with that sharp edge in her voice. She said that as the sister I should be more accommodating, that I was putting one single day over my brother's well-being, that weddings can be moved, but good ticket prices cannot. Meanwhile, I was staring at spreadsheets of my colleagues' schedules, vendor timelines, and our budget, realizing that we had already built our lives around this date. I told her calmly, over and over, that we were keeping it. That was when the tone really shifted. In the family group chat, she began complaining in vague terms about people who do not think about others and how some children forget everything their parents have done for them. Jake posted an Instagram story about people who act like the world revolves around their little events, paired with a shot of his flight confirmation, which was about as subtle as a brick. It was the first time I saw the pattern so clearly with no way to explain it away in my head, in my mother's mind. My wedding was optional. My brother's trip to Hawaii was not. The official break came in the most casual, almost cheerful way possible. A few weeks before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a group text from my mom that said, "Word for word, we will celebrate later, dear. Jake's trip is set. We will plan something special just for you when everyone is less busy." There were a couple of heart reactions from relatives who, I realized, did not fully understand what that message meant. I did. My stomach dropped. There was no question in that message, no opening for a conversation, no apology. It was a statement of priorities. My wedding was the thing that could be postponed. My brother's discounted Hawaii vacation was not. I called her immediately. When she answered, she sounded annoyed, like I had interrupted something important. I asked her straight out if that text meant she, my dad, and Jake were not coming to the wedding. She sighed, long and dramatic, and said, "Rachel, you know how expensive it is to change flights. Your brother has worked himself to the bone. He needs this. We can have a nice dinner when he gets back. Maybe invite a few relatives. It will still be special." I told her a dinner after the fact was not the same as watching her daughter get married. I said, "This is my wedding, Mom, not a birthday you can celebrate any weekend." She snapped back that I was being ungrateful, that I was refusing to see the bigger picture, that family has to be flexible for each other. When I asked where that flexibility was when it came to me, there was a beat of silence. Then she changed the subject and said she did not want to argue. My dad texted me later that night. It was short. Just, "I am sorry, kiddo. I wish the timing had worked out. We will make it up to you." I stared at that message for a long time before typing back. "So you are really choosing to sit in a beach chair next to Mom and Jake, instead of coming to your only daughter's wedding?" He never answered, I imagined him in his armchair, reading my text, feeling guilty, and then putting the phone down because confronting my mother would be harder than disappointing me. In the days leading up to the wedding, my social media feed filled with pictures of my family in Hawaii. Jake posted endless shots of hotel pools, ocean views, plates of food, all with captions about family time in paradise and resetting with the people who matter most. In one video, my mom, Karen, was in the background with a flower in her hair, laughing with a drink in her hand. There was not a single hint that her daughter was about to walk down the aisle on the other side of the ocean. Whenever I opened the family group chat, I saw quick mentions of snorkeling, sunsets, and how relaxing it all was. No one asked how my final wedding prep was going. No one even mentioned the date. It was like my wedding had been erased from the family calendar. On my wedding day, the vineyard was beautiful. The sky was clear, the air was cool, and the rows of grapevines framed the ceremony space in a way that would have made for perfect family photos, if my family had been there. When I walked past the neat row of chairs marked with a small sign that said, "Family," on my side, my chest tightened. The only person sitting there was my Aunt Linda, my mom's older sister, who had flown in quietly without broadcasting it. She stood up when she saw me, hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, and whispered in my ear, "I am here for you, not for their nonsense." Behind her, a couple of cousins who lived nearby slid into seats too, looking a little nervous but determined. The rest of the chairs on that side stayed painfully empty. On the other side of the aisle, Alex's family filled their rows completely. His parents had flown up from California with siblings, cousins, and even two elderly relatives who needed help up the small slope but refused to miss it. His mom cried when she saw me in my dress, kissed my cheek, and told me she had always dreamed of gaining a daughter like me. The contrast was almost dizzying. During the ceremony, I could feel the emptiness to my left like a cold draft. When the officiant asked who was giving me away, it was Alex's father who stepped forward. Not because we made some big symbolic decision, but because there was no one from my side to take that step. I glanced briefly at the chairs where my parents should have been. In my head, I saw my mother in a beach chair instead, my brother raising a drink over a plate of resort food, and my father pretending not to notice the time. Alex must have seen something flicker across my face because he squeezed my hands a little tighter, anchoring me. It was his way of saying, without words, "You are not alone, even if your own family chose not to show up." After the ceremony, we took photos with his family, with my aunt and cousins, with friends who had flown in on their own dime just to stand by us. People asked gently, "Where are your parents?" "Rachel, travel issues." And I listened to myself give the same vague answer. They could not make it, while knowing the truth was so much uglier. Later in the evening, after the toasts and the first dance and the shaky moment where I almost cried in the bathroom and then fixed my makeup and smiled anyway, one of the venue staff came up to me holding an envelope. "This arrived by mail this morning," they said. It had my parents' return address on it. My stomach clenched as I opened it. Inside was a small check and a folded note in my mother's tidy handwriting. "We hope you understand priorities when you are older. Love, Mom and Dad." That was it. No, I am sorry. No, I wish we could have been there. Just a reminder that in her mind, choosing a trip over my wedding was a mature, reasonable choice that I would someday applaud. I stood there in my wedding dress, holding that note, and felt something inside me shift. Later that night, I posted one simple photo on social media, a picture of Alex and me with his parents, all of us laughing under the string lights at the vineyard. I captioned it, "Sometimes, the family that shows up for you is the one you build yourself." I did not tag anyone. I did not mention Hawaii. I did not call anyone out by name. Within an hour, Jake commented, "Looks fun. Wish schedules had aligned." As if the schedule had been some random cosmic accident and not a deliberate choice he and my mother had defended over and over. Reading that comment, I felt the last bit of benefit of the doubt evaporate. I stopped telling myself this was a misunderstanding or a one-time mistake. It was a pattern, laid out in front of me in real time, and I finally understood that the version of family my mother believed in did not actually include me in the way I had always hoped. For our honeymoon, Alex and I flew to a resort in the Caribbean, one of those all-inclusive places with buffets that never close, frozen drinks that show up the second you finish the last sip, and pools that seem to spill straight into the ocean. When we landed, I turned my phone to airplane mode and told myself I was going to enjoy 1 week without thinking about empty chairs, guilt-soaked messages from my mother, or whether anyone back east was talking about my wedding. We spent the first few days doing exactly that, sleeping in, ordering room service just because we could, and drinking coffee on the balcony while the sun came up over the water. We went on a snorkeling excursion where the guide threw bread into the sea and fish swarmed around us, and every few minutes Alex would reach for my hand underwater, like he could still feel how raw I was underneath the smiles. At night, when we lay in bed listening to the waves hit the shore, he would say things like, "This is our life now, not theirs." And I wanted so badly to believe it was that simple, that geography and a ring on my finger were enough to put real distance between me and my family. A few days in, I finally turned my phone back on to check in with work and make sure nothing urgent had exploded in my inbox. The moment my notifications loaded, the illusion of peace cracked. The family group chat had blown up. There were dozens of messages from my mom complaining about how some relatives had dared to attend my wedding and post pictures. She was calling it a betrayal of family unity, saying she could not believe her own sister would pick sides against her, and implying that anyone who supported me was causing division. Mixed into that were screenshots that other relatives had sent me privately. On Facebook, my mother had written a long, dramatic status about how heartbreaking it is when a child refuses to understand sacrifice, how sometimes mothers have to make hard choices that ungrateful children will not appreciate until they are parents themselves. She never used my name, but she did not have to. Everyone in the family knew exactly who she meant and what choice she was defending. My brother had joined in too. On his social media, he had posted a short video talking straight into the camera about how sometimes important life events overlap, and you have to make tough calls to protect your mental health, and how there will always be people who refuse to see that and only care about their own big day. The caption talked about toxic expectations and how he was done being blamed for taking care of himself. Underneath that video, the comments told their own story. A couple of his friends hyped him up, but then my cousin Mike jumped in and wrote, "You skipped your sister's wedding for a vacation. There is no way to dress that up." A mini argument had broken out from there, with Mike basically refusing to back down and a few other relatives liking his comment but not saying anything out loud. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, ugly and strangely clarifying. While I was still scrolling through that mess, Alex's phone started buzzing too. My mom had decided that if she could not guilt me directly, she would go around me. She sent him long paragraphs about how I had always been sensitive and dramatic, and how she needed his help to get me to see things rationally. She wrote that he was the man of the house now and had a responsibility to encourage me to forgive, that holding on to anger would poison our marriage. She framed the entire situation as a simple scheduling conflict blown out of proportion by my emotions, leaving out the part where she had knowingly chosen a beach over her only child's wedding. She described herself and Jake as the real victims, people who were being unfairly attacked for taking care of their mental health. Alex read the messages, looked over at me, and asked what I wanted him to say. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Every instinct I had been trained with since childhood told me to craft a careful explanation, to smooth things over, to make sure my mother did not feel attacked. Instead, I heard myself say that I was done explaining myself. Alex wrote back once, politely but firmly, that we had given everyone the date months in advance, that choosing not to come had been their decision, and that continuing to argue about it would not change what had already happened. He told her that for our own sanity, we were not going to keep rehashing it. After that, she switched tactics with him, saying she was only trying to protect the family, that she did not want this to tear us apart, and that he would understand her perspective better once he had children. It was the same message she had aimed at me, just repackaged. My dad sent me a separate text around the same time. It said, "I am sorry things got so heated. I hate seeing the family like this. Maybe we can all talk when you get back." It sounded remorseful on the surface, but there was nothing behind it. No specific acknowledgement of what they had done, no ownership, no indication that he was willing to stand up to my mother. It was the emotional version of a shrug. While I sat there on the edge of the resort bed, the air conditioner humming and the sound of the ocean muffled by the sliding glass door, I realized I did not feel the sharp, hot anger I would have expected. I felt something heavier and lower, a kind of bone-deep exhaustion. It was like watching the same play I had seen my whole life, just with different props. They hurt me in a way that was undeniable, then immediately rewrote the story so they were the ones under attack, and finally turned to me to fix it, to smooth it over, to keep the peace. Even on my honeymoon, they still expected me to be the one doing emotional cleanup. I muted the family chat, turned off social media notifications, and set my phone face down on the nightstand. Alex and I went down to the pool, and I tried to let the sunlight and warm water wash the weight off my shoulders. That night, sitting on the balcony with a drink in my hand and the sky fading from blue to dark purple, I realized that for the first time, I was not just hurt by what they had done. I was starting to question why I kept stepping back into the same role they had assigned me, the good daughter who absorbed every slight and called it love. The thought that I did not actually have to keep playing that part for the rest of my life slipped quietly into my mind and stayed there, small but solid, waiting for its moment. A few months after the honeymoon, things went quiet. My mom stopped posting vague statuses. The family chat slowed down, and for a while I focused on work, my marriage, and building a life that did not revolve around whether my mother approved. Then, one afternoon, I noticed something strange. My mom started liking my old photos on social media, not the recent ones, but pictures from college, shots of me and Jake as kids, and even a few from our engagement shoot that she had completely ignored before. She left a couple of soft comments like, "Such a beautiful memory," and my stomach tightened in that familiar way. Alex glanced at my phone and said, "They want something." He was right. A week later, an ivory envelope showed up in our mailbox with my parents' return address. Inside was a formal wedding invitation with embossed letters announcing the marriage of Jake to Sophia at a resort in Florida. It was a full weekend event, welcome dinner, beach ceremony, brunch send-off, the works. At the bottom, in my mother's handwriting, someone had added, "It would mean so much to the family if you and Alex could be there." There was no apology, no mention of my wedding, just an expectation that I would show up now that it was their turn to celebrate. Not long after, my phone rang. It was my mom. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. She sounded overly bright, like she was auditioning for a commercial. She told me how happy she was for Jake, how Sophia was lovely, how this could be a chance for a fresh start. She used phrases like new beginnings and healing as a family and said more than once, "We do not want to hold on to the past." When I asked if she meant the part where she skipped my wedding, she went quiet for a beat, then said, "We all made mistakes, but this is bigger than one day." She kept circling back to the same line. Family has to show up for each other, Rachel, as if she had never proven the opposite. After that call, Jake texted me, pretending nothing had really happened. He wrote, "Hey, I really hope you and Alex can make it. Let us move on, it has been long enough." He made it sound like we had a minor argument instead of him choosing a beach over my vows. He said things like, "I do not want bad blood between us," and "It would mean a lot if my only sister was there when I get married." For a minute, the old version of me stirred, the one who always folded, who always thought, maybe I am overreacting, maybe I should be the bigger person. But then I remembered standing in my dress next to those empty chairs, remembered the check with the note about priorities, remembered watching my family clink glasses in Hawaii while I said my vows without them. The next time my mom called, she ramped up the pressure. She told me my refusal to commit was causing stress for everyone, that my absence would embarrass the family, that people would ask why my parents' only child was not there. She framed it as my responsibility to protect them from uncomfortable questions. Finally, she said, "This is your chance to prove you care more about family than grudges." I felt something settle inside me, a kind of calm I had not had before. I told her, very evenly, that I would not be attending. She exploded immediately, asking how I could do this to my brother, accusing me of trying to punish them. I let her vent. Then I said, "The last time there was a family wedding, my day was less important than your vacation. You told me we would celebrate later, and we never did. Now you are asking me to rearrange my life for his big day. So no, not this time. My schedule cannot wait." There was a long silence on the line. Then she snapped that I was being spiteful and immature, that I was proving exactly why she could not reason with me. Jake texted again after that, this time less friendly, calling me petty and telling me I needed to grow up. I did not argue. I simply replied, "I hope your wedding is everything you want. We will not be there." After I hung up, Alex suggested we do something for ourselves that weekend instead. Not as some elaborate revenge stunt, just as a way to reclaim the time. We went online and booked a ski trip to Colorado for the exact dates of Jake's wedding, used one of those travel apps my brother loves so much, and grabbed a decent deal on flights and a lodge. When a couple of relatives asked if we were going to Florida, I told the truth in a flat, calm tone. "No, we are going skiing." They looked surprised, but a few of them nodded like they understood more than they said. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, my mom complained in the family chat about how I was choosing a vacation over my brother's big day, apparently missing the irony completely. Jake posted about walking down the aisle without his sister there, and framed it like I was abandoning the family. This time, though, I did not chase the narrative. I did not defend myself in the comments or send long explanations to anyone. I packed my suitcase, held my husband's hand on the flight to Colorado, and felt, for the first time in a long time, like I was finally treating my own life as something worth showing up for. The day of Jake's wedding in Florida, Alex and I were halfway up a mountain in Colorado, riding a ski lift with the sun bouncing off the snow so bright it hurt my eyes. My phone buzzed a few times in my pocket, but I did not check it right away. When we stopped for hot chocolate at the lodge, I finally glanced down. My notifications were full of photos and posts from relatives. Jake standing under an arch on the beach, Sophia in a sparkly dress, my parents in coordinated outfits, everything curated and filtered. In one group photo, there was an empty space next to my mom, and one of my cousins had messaged me privately saying, "They keep telling people you could not make it because of work, but everyone remembers Hawaii." I scrolled for a minute, then put my phone away. I did not feel angry the way I used to, just distant, like I was watching strangers. Over the next few months, pieces of what really happened at that wedding and after started to filter back to me through the relatives who still talked to both sides. Apparently, the perfect weekend had not been all that perfect. Jake and Sophia had argued more than once about money, both before and after the ceremony. They had stretched their budget to impress people, booking a resort they could not really afford, upgrading open bars, adding extras just so it would look good on social media. There were whispers that most of it was financed on credit cards and loans my parents had co-signed. Not long after the wedding, their fights about spending turned into fights about everything. Jake was still obsessed with travel, still talking about the next trip, the next boys' weekend, the next big purchase. Sophia wanted to pay down debt, save for a house, maybe think about kids someday when things were stable. Instead, she was watching her new husband work crazy hours, burn out, and then come home ranting about how everyone expected too much from him. At work, his numbers started to slip. The same boss who used to praise him for his hustle began warning him about his attitude and missed targets. A cousin told me he had taken a few questionable days off right after the wedding to extend yet another little getaway, and it had not gone unnoticed. Within a year, it all collapsed. The marriage, already full of resentment and financial strain, ended in a messy separation. Sophia moved out, took her things, and told anyone who asked that she wanted a partner, not an overgrown teenager who expected his mother to bail him out forever. The company Jake worked for let him go not long after. Officially, it was performance-related, but everybody knew that his reputation for being unreliable and constantly prioritizing his own comfort did not help him. With the debt from the wedding, the leftover credit card balances from years of trips, and now no steady income, he ended up moving back in with my parents. My mom tried to spin it as a temporary reset, talking to relatives about how he just needed time to get back on his feet, how the job market was tough, how people did not understand how much pressure he was under. But people remembered Hawaii. They remembered Florida. They remembered the way she had defended every selfish choice he made and tried to turn every consequence into proof that the world was unfair to him. Slowly, invitations to extended family gatherings stopped, including her. Group chats split into smaller ones, where she was not present. When she posted online about trust and loyalty and how painful it is when family turns their backs on you, the comment sections were mostly silent. Meanwhile, my life was moving in the opposite direction. Work was going well. I had led a campaign that did better than anyone expected, and my boss put me up for a promotion. At home, Alex and I were talking seriously about having a baby. For the first time, I thought about what kind of family I wanted my future child to grow up around, and the picture of my mother and Jake sitting in that cramped apartment full of resentment and denial did not fit. When I found out I was pregnant, I told Alex first, then a few close friends, then the relatives who had stood by me. I did not tell my parents. It was not an impulsive decision. It came from months of watching how they reacted when things did not revolve around them, from realizing that every time I let them back in unchecked, I ended up bleeding for it. I chose to hold that news close, to protect it, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel guilty about keeping something important from my mother. I felt like I was finally learning from everything they had taught me, just not in the way they intended. When our daughter Lily was born, the room felt full, even without my side of the family there. Alex cried harder than the baby. I laughed and cried with him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to pure peace. We sent photos to the people who had actually shown up for us over the past year. The friends who had flown in for our wedding. The relatives who had defended me when my mom and Jake tried to rewrite what happened. I did not send anything to my parents. I knew if I let my mother into that moment, she would find a way to center herself in it, to turn Lily into another tool in the endless game of guilt and obligation. So I made a different choice. Quietly, without a big announcement, I blocked my mom and Jake on every platform. No more group chat, No more vague posts about loyalty that were really about me. No more late night paragraphs demanding that I fix the mess they created. I kept my phone number, but I stopped replying to anything that came from them. For months after, little bits still slipped through. My dad sent a short email after he heard through the grapevine that I had a baby. He wrote that he was happy for me, that he would love to meet his granddaughter someday, and that he hoped we could all put the past behind us. There was no mention of the wedding he missed, no mention of how he had stood by while my mom chose a vacation over his own daughter's vows. I wrote back once, thanking him for the kind words and saying that right now, my priority was protecting my family from more drama. I told him if he ever wanted a real relationship with me or Lily, it would have to start with him acknowledging what actually happened, not pretending it was all some vague misunderstanding. He never replied. Word filtered back through my Aunt Linda and my cousin Mike that things at my parents' place were not good. Jake was still there, bouncing between short-term gigs, blaming bosses, the economy, bad luck, everything except his own choices. The debt from the wedding and the lifestyle he had insisted on was still hanging over him. My mom complained to anyone who would listen that I was using Lily to punish her, that I had turned cold, that she did not understand how a daughter could cut off her own mother. But the more she talked, the less people wanted to hear it. A lot of our relatives had their own kids now. They watched how she had treated me, how she had enabled Jake, and quietly decided they did not want that energy near their families either. Invitations stopped. Phone calls got shorter. Her audience shrank. While all of that was happening, my life narrowed in the best possible way. My world became early morning feedings, late night emails to my team while Lily slept on my chest, and weekend walks around Seattle with a stroller and a coffee in hand. I joined a local moms group, started hiking again when my body was ready, and even began writing short posts on a parenting blog about boundaries and breaking unhealthy family patterns. Sometimes I would catch myself staring at Lily and thinking, if I let my mother into her life exactly as she is now, my daughter will grow up thinking this kind of treatment is normal. That guilt and manipulation are just part of loving someone. That some people are allowed to hurt you over and over because they share your DNA. I refused to hand that lesson down, so I stuck with my decision. No big dramatic confrontation, no screaming matches or long speeches. Just a simple, consistent no. They had chosen a vacation over my wedding. They had chosen appearances over accountability. I chose my child, my marriage, and my own sanity. And as the noise from their side faded, something surprising happened. The shame I had carried for years started to feel lighter. I did not wake up dreading the next message or rehearsing explanations in my head. The people who mattered to me showed up, supported me, and loved my daughter without strings attached. One afternoon, while Lily napped and Alex worked at the kitchen table, I realized I no longer felt like the girl begging her family to see her as important. I felt like an adult who had finally stepped out of a role that was never mine to begin with. People love to say that family is everything. What they do not tell you is that sometimes protecting your peace and your children means stepping back from the people who share your last name. If someone can skip your wedding for a trip and then demand front row seats to your life when it suits them, you are allowed to say no. You are allowed to set boundaries and keep them. I did not destroy a family. I stopped letting a broken version of family destroy me. And if you have ever been guilted into accepting less than basic respect because blood is supposed to be thicker than water, maybe you need to hear this too. You are allowed to choose yourself